This is Arrakis. To the galaxy, it is known by another name, Dune. It is the only source of the spice melange, the substance that extends life, expands consciousness, and makes interstellar travel possible. It is the most valuable and most brutal planet in the human Imperium. But to the people who live in its shadows, in the crevices of the rock and the deep desert, it is simply home. They are the Fremen, the survivors, the ghosts of the sand. This is not the story of the emperors, the great houses, or the spacing guild that fight for control of this world. This is the story of a life lived in its heart, a life forged by its heat, sharpened by its austerity, and defined by its fierce, unyielding realities. This is the story of Chani, daughter of the desert. Chapter 1. The Sietch Child. Life on Arrakis begins with a single, inviolable law. The water of the body belongs to the tribe. A person's flesh is their own, but their moisture, their sweat, their tears, their blood, their very essence upon death is the property of the collective. In a world where a single cup of water is a measure of wealth, this is the first and last commandment. Chani was born into this law. She was born in Sietch Tabor, a cavernous fastness hidden deep in the northern rock formations. A Sietch is more than a home. It is a fortress, a micro-society, a secret. To the Harkonnen rulers who nominally controlled the planet, these Sietches did not exist. The Fremen were dismissed as scattered, primitive nomads. This was a convenient and fatal lie. Chani's lineage was unique. Her mother was pure-blood Fremen, descended from the generations of Zen Sunni wanderers who had made the desert their sanctuary. Her father was a shadow, a myth known to the Fremen as Liet. To the Imperium, he was Liet Kynes, the imperial planetologist, the neutral arbiter of the planet's ecology. But to the Fremen, he was their hidden leader, the man who nurtured a secret, impossible dream, to terraform Arrakis, to turn the dunes green. Chani was the daughter of two worlds, the pragmatism of the Sietch and the grand ecological vision of her father. From her mother, she learned the rituals of water and spice. From her father, she inherited a dream of a world she had never seen, a world with open water, with rain. The Fremen child is trained from birth in the disciplines of the stillsuit. The suit is a second skin. It captures all moisture extruded by the body, perspiration, urine. The vapor from one's breath filters it and pumps it back to catch pockets for drinking. A well-fitted suit, properly maintained, will lose less than a thimbleful of water a day. To a Fremen, the suit is life. Their word for the suit's function is Sihaya, the desert spring. Her education was the desert itself. By 10, she knew the Sandwalk. By 12, she could read the weather in the patterns of the dust, could navigate by the stars and the lines of the dunes. She learned the maker hooks, the tools used to ride Shai-Hulud, the great sandworm, the physical manifestation of the Fremen god. She was also a Sayadina, a priestess in the Fremen religious order. She was trained in the rituals, the chants, and the legends. Chief among these was the prophecy of the Lisan al-Gaib, the voice from the outer world, a messiah, planted generations ago by the Bene Gesserit Missionaria Protectiva, who would come and lead the Fremen to paradise. To the elder Sayadinas, this was a matter of fervent faith. To Chani, it was a story. Her reality was the krisk knife at her hip, a blade milk-white, double-edged, and carved from the tooth of a dead sandworm. A krisk knife could not be sheathed until it had drawn blood. This was not a metaphor. This was the second law of Fremen life. Her world was hard, but it was known. It was the cycle of spice gathering, Sietch life, and survival. It was the constant, low-grade war against the brutal Harkonnen patrols. She saw her friends and family die in these small, anonymous skirmishes. She learned to kill, to tend the wounded, and, most importantly, to reclaim the water from the dead. She was Kynes' daughter, and that carried weight. But she earned her own place. She was a Fedaykin, before she was a woman. A death commando. She had a quietness to her. She didn't waste motion, or words, or water. When the Harkonnens came, she was the first to the rock lip, and the last to return. She was a hunter. There was no fear in her, only the desert. Then, the whispers began. The Harkonnens were leaving. Arrakis was to be given to a new house, the Atreides. The name meant nothing to Chani. It was just one off-world master replacing another. But the whispers were followed by a new rumor. The Atreides Duke had a son born of a Bene Gesserit, a son who fit the prophecies. Chani, the pragmatist, the warrior, dismissed it. Prophecies were for old women in the dark. The desert taught one lesson. Trust what you can hold. Trust the knife. Trust the suit. Trust the tribe. She could not know that her world, the hard, known, brutal world of the Sietch, was about to be broken open forever. Chapter 2. The Voice from the Outer World. The fall of House Atreides was swift and total. A betrayal from within, a joint assault by their Harkonnen rivals and the Emperor's own elite Sardaukar troops. The Duke Leto was dead. The capital, Arrakeen, was lost. To the Fremen, this was just another chaotic spasm of off-world power. But 2 survivors escaped the inferno, fleeing into the deep desert where no Harkonnen patrol could follow. A woman, the Bene Gesserit Lady Jessica, and her son, Paul. They were found by a patrol from Sietch Tabor, led by Stilgar. The challenge was inevitable. Jameis, a warrior of Stilgar's, refused to accept these off-worlders. He challenged Paul's mother, Jessica, and Paul stepped in to fight for her. To Chani, the outcome was certain. This soft-skinned boy, who walked with the awkward thump of an off-worlder, could not possibly stand against Jameis, a seasoned fighter. This would be a quick death, a reclamation of water. He was strange. He moved like nothing I had ever seen. The weirding way, his mother called it. Fast, unpredictable. He was small, but he was fast. Jameis was strong, but his knife found only air. I saw the boy hesitate. He didn't want to kill. An absurd, water-fat sentiment. To hesitate in a knife fight is to die. But he didn't die. Paul had won. He had killed Jameis. He stood over the body, shaking. He had taken his first life. Chani stepped forward. By Fremen law, she was now responsible for this boy. She had been tasked by Stilgar with guarding him, and by backing Jameis in the challenge, she had, in a way, bet on his death. Now, her duty shifted. She offered Paul her krisk knife. She showed him the rituals of the dead, but it was what Paul did next that stopped her. He gives moisture to the dead, to the Fremen. Tears were the ultimate sacrifice. Water given not for life, but from emotion. It was a shocking, profound gesture. Paul Atreides, in his grief, had proven his worth in a way no victory in combat could. Chani watched him. This was the Lisan al-Gaib, this boy who wept for a man who tried to kill him. Her skepticism warred with a new, strange emotion. It was not awe, it was curiosity. A dangerous, compelling curiosity. Paul is given the Fremen name Usul, the base of the pillar. He is also given a secret name, Muad'Dib, the small desert mouse. Chani is assigned as his teacher. She is to turn this off-world boy into a Fremen. Stilgar commanded it. Teach him our ways, he said. He is now one of us. I thought it was a fool's errand. How do you teach the sand to someone who is not of the sand? I taught him the stillsuit, how to walk, how to read the signs, how to place a thumper to call a worm. I taught him with the hard patience of the desert. I expected him to fail, but he did not fail. He learned faster than any child of the Sietch. His senses, trained by his Bene Gesserit mother and his Atreides weapons masters, absorbed everything. He learned the rhythms of the desert as if he were remembering them, not learning them for the first time. And he, in turn, began to change Chani. He told her of his home world, Caladan, A world of water. So much water, it fell from the sky. Chani tried to imagine it. It seemed like a nightmare, a place of drowning. He described green, not the gray green of a Sietch-grown plant, but a universe of green. She, in turn, told him the secrets of the Sietch, not the prophecies, but the small things, the taste of spice coffee, the feel of the pre-dawn wind, the sound of a worm thump. In the deep distance, he saw things. He would wake up, gasping, and tell me of things that had not yet happened. He saw the Harkonnens before they arrived. He saw a storm on the other side of the planet. I thought it was the spice. It was always the spice, but this was different. It was controlled. He called it prescience. He said he saw the future. I told him no one sees the future. We see the present, and we act. That is the Fremen way. But even she began to believe. He was not just a duke's son. He was something new. And in the harsh, pragmatic world of the Sietch, a bond was forming. It was not the soft love of the Imperium. It was a Fremen bond, built on shared danger, mutual respect, and the quiet understanding of two people living on the edge of a knife. He was Usul, her Usul, and she was his Sihaya, his desert spring. 3. Sayadina and consort. The transformation of Paul Atreides into Paul Muad'Dib was a storm that swept through the Fremen world. He was not just a fighter, he was a revolutionary. He harnessed their fierce independence, their guerrilla warfare tactics, and their mastery of the desert. And he added something new, the weirding way of combat, and a prescient strategy that seemed to borders on magic. He and his mother taught the Fremen to fight in a new way, to turn their sound and motion into weapons. The Fremen, already the most dangerous fighters in the galaxy, became something more. They became Fedaykin, holy warriors in a new kind of war. And at the center of this storm was Chani. The Harkonnen Thopter patrols fly a three-point pattern, but they are lazy. They cut the southern corner after the third patrol. If we place a team here, on the high rock, we can take them as they turn. They won't have time to send a signal. She was not just his lover. She was his partner, his lieutenant, his most trusted counsel. She knew the desert, and she knew the enemy. Where he saw the grand cosmic patterns of the future, she saw the immediate tactical reality of the present. She was the anchor that kept his prescient visions tied to the bedrock of Arrakis. She was a wild thing, utterly Fremen. She had none of the artifice of the court, or even of the Bene Gesserit. Her devotion to my son was absolute, but it was not blind. It was a choice. She guarded his humanity. While I and others saw the Kwisatz Haderach, the Messiah, she saw Usul, the man. I worried she would hold him back from his destiny. I was wrong. She was the only thing holding him together. The pressure on Paul was immense. To fully unlock his prescient abilities, to become the true Kwisatz Haderach, he had to do the unthinkable, take the water of life. This was the poison of a drowned sandworm, the spice essence used by the Fremen Reverend Mothers to unlock their other memory. It was lethal to any man who tried it. He did it, and he fell into a coma, a state so deep he was indistinguishable from death. They were going to kill him. They were going to reclaim his water. I could feel nothing from him. He was gone, but he had told me, "If I am lost, you will know how to find me." He had taught me of Caladan, of the water. He said water is the key. He was locked in a desert of the mind. He needed his Sihaya, Chani. In an act of pure, desperate instinct, mixed her own sacred tears with the water of life. She forced the liquid between his lips, calling his name, calling him back from the precipice. He woke, and he was no longer just Paul Muad'Dib. He was the Kwisatz Haderach, the one who could be in many places at once. His consciousness spanned time and space. He saw the past, the present, and the terrible, golden path of the future. He was a god in the making, and in that moment of triumph, Chani felt the first, cold sting of loss. She had called him back, but the man who returned was not entirely the man who had left. He was now bound to a future that terrified him, a jihad that would sweep the galaxy in his name. He told me what he saw. A universe in flames, legions of Fremen, my people, pouring out across the stars, killing, converting, all in his name. The name of Muad'Dib. He wept. He said he was a monster. I held him. I told him, "You are Usul. You are my man. You are here, now. The future is not yet written." But I saw it in his eyes. He was trapped by it, and I was trapped with him. In the midst of this escalating war, in the quiet moments between raids, there was a brief, fierce spring. Chani became pregnant. To the Fremen, a child is a gift, a sign of the tribe's strength. She gave birth to a son. They named him Leto, after Paul's murdered father. For a short time, in the deep Sietch, there was a family. There was Chani, Sayadina of the Fremen. There was Paul, the Messiah. And there was Leto, the son of a duke and a desert warrior. This small, impossible family, existing in the eye of a hurricane that was about to consume the galaxy. 4. Jihad and tragedy. The war for Arrakis reached its climax. Paul Muad'Dib, now the undisputed leader of all Fremen tribes, prepared for a final assault on the Harkonnen and Imperial forces in Arrakeen. He had a weapon they could not counter, the desert itself. He would use the sandworms as cavalry, and he would destroy the spice fields, holding the entire galaxy hostage. But the Emperor and the Baron Harkonnen were not idle. They knew the Fremen Messiah was based in the deep desert. They launched a desperate, brutal counterattack. The raid was a massacre. The target was a supply sietch, where the women, children, and elderly were kept. Paul and Chani were leading a campaign far to the south. They received the news via a messenger. The sietch was destroyed. Among the dead, their son Leto. His future, his terrible purpose. It killed my son. He knew. He knew it would happen, and he let it happen. He said it was necessary, that to change it would bring something worse. What is worse than the death of your child? He spoke of the golden path, of saving humanity. I did not care about humanity. I cared about my son, his small hand, his blue eyes. The man I loved, Usul, was gone. In his place was Muad'Dib, the god. And I was his tool, his weapon, his fanatic. I hated him in that moment. I hated his godhood. I hated the future he served. But I still loved him. So I did the only thing a Fremen can do. I turned my grief into a blade. The battle for Arrakeen was not a battle. It was a slaughter. The Sardaukar, the most feared troops in the galaxy, broke before the Fremen. Chani fought with a terrible, suicidal bravery. She was not fighting for a messiah or for a green Arrakis. She was fighting to avenge her son. She was an instrument of pure, distilled grief. Paul Muad'Dib confronted the Emperor Shaddam IV. He defeated the Emperor's champion, Feyd-Rautha Harkonnen, in single combat. He seized the Imperial throne. He had won. The Fremen had won. Arrakis was theirs. The galaxy was at his feet. To secure his throne, he made a political calculation. He would marry the Emperor's daughter, the Princess Irulan. It was a cold, strategic move to legitimize his rule, to merge the old Imperium with his new, Fremen-backed dynasty. He announced this to his council. He announced it to Chani. A marriage. To her, that pale, water-soft princess. He stood there, the emperor of everything, and told me he was taking her as his wife. For politics. For the throne. He turned to me, in front of all of them. The princess, his mother, Stilgar. He told them I would not be his wife. He said, "Chani is my concubine." Concubine, a word of the Imperium. a word for a thing, a possession. But then he looked at me. And his eyes were Usul. He was trapped. He was begging me to understand. And the Princess Irulan. She was a Bene Gesserit. She understood, too. She knew she would be his wife in name, but never share his bed. I am Fremen. We do not have such words. You are a man's partner, or you are not. I had a choice. I could walk back into the desert, leave him to his golden throne. Or I could stay. I stayed, I told him. I will not be less than your wife. I would live in his house. I would be by his side. Let the galaxy call me concubine. They did not know me. They did not know us. I was Chani of Sietch, and I would see this to the end. 5. The Golden Prison. The victory of Muad'Dib unleashed the storm he had so feared. His Fremen legions, fueled by religious fanaticism, poured out of Arrakis. The Jihad burned across the galaxy. Billions died. A new, terrible empire was born, ruled from the keep at Arrakeen. And Chani, the desert-born warrior, found herself in a new kind of prison. The imperial court at Arrakeen was a world of intrigue, whispers, and poison. It was a place of soft surfaces and sharp knives hidden behind smiles. It was everything a Fremen despises. Chani was the unofficial wife of a living god. She was the mother of his murdered heir. She held more power than anyone, save Paul himself, and she was hated. She was hated by the old guard, who saw her as a desert savage. She was hated by the new Fremen converts, who saw her pragmatic skepticism as heresy. And she was hated, most dangerously, by the Bene Gesserit and the Spacing Guild, who saw her as the one human link to the Messiah, the one person who could influence him. Her chief rival was not a warrior, but a historian, the Princess Irulan. Chani. She was his shadow. In all my time as his wife, he never once touched me. I was the empress, but I was a virgin. I was a vessel for a political alliance. She was his wife. She was the one who shared his bed, his thoughts, his burdens. I recorded his history. She was his history. And she was the one who could give him what I could not, an Atreides heir. The Bene Gesserit order. We could not allow that. Not her heir. Irulan, acting on secret orders from the Bene Gesserit Reverend Mother Gaius Helen Mohiam, began a subtle, terrible campaign. She fed Chani contraceptives, mixed secretly into her food. For years, Chani could not conceive. This failure became a source of deep, personal shame. In a Fremen culture that prized fertility, she felt broken. She and Paul grew more distant. He was consumed by the burdens of empire and the horrors of his jihad. She was trapped in a gilded cage, failing in the one duty she felt she had left. I hated the keep. I hated the water-fat courtiers. I hated the air. It was too thick. I was barren, a failure, Usul. He was a god to billions, but he would come to my chambers at night, and he was just a man, a tired, broken man. He knew his prescience. He knew Irulan was poisoning me. And he let it happen. He said, "It is part of the path, my Chani. It is necessary." Necessary. Again, that word. His godhood demanded our sacrifice. My son. Now, my fertility. I began to hate his visions. I hated the future. I wanted the present. Chani, in desperation, turned from imperial doctors. She turned back to the desert. She went on an ancient Fremen fertility diet, a massive, near-lethal intake of pure spice. She would burn the poisons out of her, or she would die trying. It worked. The poison was nullified. She became pregnant. But this new life came at a terrible cost. The spice-heavy diet made the pregnancy abnormal. The fetuses within her were growing at an unnatural rate. They were consuming her from the inside out. And, for Paul, a new, terrifying blindness had set in. His prescient vision, which had seen the rise and fall of empires, could not see his own children. They were hidden from him. He was blind. For the first time, he was blind. The spice, the things inside me, they were like him. They were preborn. They had consciousness. They were hiding from their own father. I was terrified. I could feel them, their minds. It was not a normal pregnancy, but I was happy. I was creating a future he could not see, a future he could not control. It was my victory, my last act of defiance. 6. A legacy of sand. The conspiracy against Paul Muad'Dib finally came to a head. A coalition of the Bene Gesserit, the Tleilaxu, and the Spacing Guild struck. They used a stone burner, an atomic weapon, in an attempt to assassinate him. The blast failed to kill him, but it destroyed his eyes. A blinded Fremen is left in the desert to die. But Paul was not just Fremen. He was the Emperor, and his visions were more precise than any eyes. He could see every word, every step, every breath, as long as he did not deviate from the path his visions had shown him. He walked, a living ghost, to Chani's chambers. Her time had come. The conspirators' final weapon was a Tleilaxu Gola, a clone of Paul's long-dead friend, Duncan Idaho. This Gola, named Height, had been sent to destroy Paul, but in this final moment, Paul's trauma and Haight's conditioning clashed. Haight's memories of the original Duncan Idaho returned. The Tleilaxu programming was broken. At the exact same moment, Chani gave birth. It was not one child. It was two, twins, a boy and a girl. And in that instant, with the birth of two new futures he had not foreseen, Paul's prescient vision, his only way of seeing, shattered. He was, for the first time, truly, completely blind. He was blind. The god was blind. He touched my face, and I saw him. Not Muad'Dib, not the Messiah, Usul, my Usul. He was back. The man I loved. He was finally, horribly free from his future. He couldn't see them. I had to tell him. They are beautiful, I said. A boy and a girl. He touched the boy, and he saw through his son's eyes. The baby's mind, open, preborn, became his eyes. He saw me. He truly saw me. For the first time in years, Chani looked at Paul. She had given him everything. Her life, her love, their first son, and now, these twins who would change the universe. And in the end, she had given him back his humanity. Her last words were to him, Usul, my Usul. She died. Chani of Sietch. Paul Muad'Dib, Emperor of the known universe, was blind. As was Fremen tradition, he walked out into the desert, alone, to meet Shai-Hulud. He was presumed dead. But Chani's legacy had only just begun. Her body was taken by the Fremen, and her water was reclaimed by the tribe. The highest honor. Her true legacy was her children, Leto, the second, and Ghanima. They were not just the heirs to an empire. They were something new. They carried her memories, and the memories of all her ancestors, within them. They were the key to the golden path that Paul had so feared. Chani, in her pragmatic defiance, in her refusal to be a pawn of fate, had given birth to the very future that would save humanity from extinction. A future that would be secured by her son, Leto II, who would merge with the sandworm and become the god emperor, ruling for 3,500 years. 7. Echoes on the sand. Chani's life is often seen as a tragedy. The lover of a messiah, the concubine of an emperor, the mother of a monster god. This is the imperial view. It is not the Fremen view. To the Fremen, her life was a triumph. She was a warrior who never bowed, a Sayadina who held fast to her truth, a mother who gave the tribe its greatest gift. She lived and died by the laws of the desert. And in the end, her water gave life to the people. She is an echo in the memory of her son, the God Emperor. She is a voice in the consciousness of her daughter. She is a story told in the Sietches. History remembers Paul Muad'Dib, the Messiah who tore the galaxy apart, but it was Chani who held him together. It was Chani who provided the anchor, the humanity, and the children who would fulfill his terrible purpose. She was not a footnote in his story. He was a cataclysm in hers. Her life was not defined by the God she loved. It was defined by the sand she walked, the knife she carried, and the fierce, pragmatic, and unyielding heart of the desert. She was Chani of Arrakis. And her story is the story of Dune.